going on, guys? Welcome back to another cigar review, and tonight we're going to be reviewing the H. Upmann Magnum 54. And so this cigar I've actually smoked twice before, and I thought both times it was really good, but I thought that it was maybe lacking some quality that would have put it in the upper echelon, similar to the previous two cigars that I reviewed, the Magnum 50 and the Connoisseur 2. I think that for me, with my H. Upmann experience so far, the Magnum 54 seemed to me like the one with the least H. Upmann DNA, besides maybe the H. Upmann Regalius, which is a much lower end cigar. So I'm excited to revisit this today, and hopefully I can get an experience that brings it into that upper echelon. Tonight though, we're going to be pairing it with a pour of the Hibiki Harmony, which is probably my favorite Japanese whiskey that I've tried to date. And my girlfriend was generous enough to get me this bottle on my birthday, so I'm excited to dip into this a little bit more, and I think it's going to make for a really great pairing. So not much else to say. There's no really background or history today to go into. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and cut and light. Interesting. I think that on the cold draw, I'm getting a little bit of grassiness and actually a floral quality, which wasn't what I was expecting. I don't think I get that too often off the cold draw, at least for Cubans. So I think the true test though is to go ahead and light this up. So let's do it. So as we're toasting this, I think this is a good time to go into the approximate size of the cigar. This is actually a 54 ring gauge, as the name implies. And in my experience, I think that Cubans tend to be a little less hefty on the ring gauge. I think that really the high 50s up into the 60s tend to be exclusively the domain of New World cigars. But I have noticed that larger ring gauges are becoming more popular all around the world, and Cubans are starting to catch on to that. And so obviously this year, I think with the announcement of, I believe, the Behike 58, the Cohiba Behike 58, I think that will kind of bring in a new era of thicker ring gauge Cuban cigars. Really great aroma so far. I think there's more of that like toasted tobacco, roasted nuts quality compared to a lot of other Cubans in the aroma, and a lot more pepper spiciness just off the aroma compared to a lot of other H. Upmanns. Very interesting first few puffs. Trying to parse what I'm getting. I think that there's a lot more, definitely a lot more spiciness compared to a lot of other Cubans that I've had. And that's always surprising to me whenever I smoke this cigar, considering H. Upmann is supposed to be a light to medium bodied Cuban marca. And like I said, maybe this is just intentionally like the one outlier. I would say the one time that I smoked the Magnum 46, from what I remember, and this was years ago, but from what I remember, it's probably a little bit similar to that. So far, I think that spicy note is dominant. And let me just take another puff just to confirm. Okay, right there, I did get that, a little bit of that Cuban twang in terms of like rich, minerally, not necessarily earth, but barnyard. And that's like the typical Cuban quality that I can usually pick up off of Cuban tobacco. Maybe a little bit of residual saltiness on the lips, but I think so far that's about it. So the first few puffs, not really that complex. I don't know yet whether it has that depth quality that I mentioned in the previous video when I reviewed the Connoisseur number 2. It's not an immediate hit with me, but I definitely want to keep smoking, and it's enough to keep me curious. So I definitely want to keep trying to find something in the flavor profile that actually really sticks with me. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm really hoping that this will turn out to be, at least after maybe the first third, at least this particular cigar, one that really hits that upper echelon. Honestly, what I'm looking for is anywhere above like a 91 or 92 would make this specific Magnum 54 the best one yet. I think the first two that I smoked were right around that like 90 to 91 range. So I took a little break from recording to take a call, and coming back to trying to pinpoint the flavor notes. I do think that it's evolved so far in a good way. The spice has definitely died down in terms of the pepper spice. And I do get a little bit now of that signature H. Upmann shortbread cookie bready type of note. And also a little bit of sweetness on the palate. And then actually that floral note is really coming through on the retrohale now. Now remember, that's something I mentioned just off of the cold draw, and I think it's really cool to also see that reflected through the nose as well. So overall, I'm pretty happy about this so far. I'll come back to you guys after the first third. I'll give you my sort of finished set of flavor notes on the palate and also through the retro. And yeah, we'll come back to it. Oh, also, I keep forgetting to say this before I leave to finish the final third of, I think, basically every cigar that I've smoked on the channel so far. But usually after I've given enough time for the cigar to really settle on my palate is when I start to pour whatever I'm drinking for the evening. That was actually a pretty decent pour there, but we'll run with it. So, like I said, good pour of the Hibiki Harmony, and I'm expecting it to also taste really great with the cigar. That's a nice smoke output. I'm looking around right now and the smoke is basically filling up a big chunk of the patio. So really great on that end. I think that as far as construction, the burn line right now is pretty sharp. I did have to touch it up a couple times, but that could have just been me smoking on the slower side, because for reference, I started this maybe right around 10:10. It's now, I think, almost 11. So it's been going for 45, 50 minutes. And I'm just now basically at the halfway point. So a bit surprising, but like I said, I was smoking on the slower end. Construction is great, smoke output is great. I think as far as flavor, which is obviously the biggest factor in coming up with my final rating, yeah, still more of the same that I mentioned earlier. That floral is coming through on the retrohale. That spice is still there, but a little bit less than obviously the big blast that I got just off of the first few puffs. Shortbread is still there, creamy, sweet cream is still there. And I guess not really much else. I think at this point, this is still like in that 91, 92 average of my last two. And I mean, I'm still happy with it. Obviously, it's objectively still like a really great cigar. It's like in that A- tier. And it's pairing really beautifully with the Hibiki Harmony. No complaints there. I think this is as perfect of a cigar and drink pairing as it can get. But hopefully, after I finish the second third, going into the final third, I'll have a much wider array of flavor notes to pull from. But at the moment, it's just, I mean, if nothing else, it's just been really consistent so far, which is good, but also maybe lacking a little bit of that complexity. Sorry, there's a plane going by, but just a little bit less than the previous two cigars that I reviewed, which isn't to knock this cigar, right? Because the Connoisseur number 2 and the Magnum 50 are, at this point, probably my two favorite cigars that I've ever smoked, if I was really forced to make a decision. So it's kind of unfair to compare this with those two. So don't let that deter you from getting and smoking this cigar at all. I think it's objectively still really, really good. I just think that for me, at least at the moment, it's lacking the qualities that would really, really push it into the upper echelon of cigars. So we'll revisit this in the final third, and I'll give you my thoughts then. So clearly well into the final third, and I think that the major shift in flavor that I got going into the final third was just a very distinct, very clear woody note. I guess maybe cedar, but I think actually I'm leaning more towards like a darker wood, like almost an oak. And it is really interesting. I just think that I will actually settle on a final rating of 92, and I'll explain why. I think that it's complex enough. Great cigar, obviously. But I think that when I compare it to 93-point rated cigars like the Ramon Allones Specially Selected or the Juan Lopez number 2, which I've previously given 93 ratings to, I just think that it's maybe just a touch under those in terms of complexity as well as flavor depth, like how much it sits in your palate and that feeling of richness. And then also, I had to touch up the burn a few times throughout the smoke. Nothing that really, really impacted my experience, but just something that I wanted to note down. And eventually, obviously, that impacted the final score by just a hair. So I think that this is the closest to 93 that it can get, but just not quite there yet. But overall, I definitely still recommend this. Let me take the final puff here on video. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm my thoughts, and yeah, I think it's more of the same. Just a really thick, chewy smoke too. I think that's generally a good quality, at least for me. But just the minor construction issues, as well as the good level of complexity, but just not amazing complexity, is what puts it at 92. So that's what I'm gonna settle on. Like I said, it pairs really great with the Hibiki Harmony. For whatever reason, it's just really doing it for me. So overall, this experience was great. I had a great time this evening sitting out here. It's not too cold, but just the cigar itself is just almost in that A tier, but still in the A- range. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Obviously, I'll be back for more. I think I'm planning on doing one a week if I can. And I think next time, I already know what I'm gonna have to review. I think I'm gonna do the Padron 1964. That way it's an interesting change of pace from just all the Cubans that I've been reviewing for the first few videos. So you'll get to see my thoughts on that. I will say though, for the vast majority of non-Cubans, they rarely ever end up crossing the 90-point mark for me at this point, because I just enjoy Cubans so much more. But I'll try to be as objective as I can, as usual, and I'll see you guys in the next one.